Miguel had never been one to believe in omens, but that phone call changed everything. It came just after the lunch shift, when the kitchen still smelled of garlic and lemongrass, and the staff had retreated to their brief moments of silence before the chaos of dinner. The manager's voice, usually indifferent, came through the phone line with an urgency that cut through the hum of the refrigerator compressors. "Prepare something special. Tonight. He's coming." Miguel wiped his hands on the hem of his apron. "Who's coming?" There was a pause. Then just one word, almost whispered. "Manny." That was all it took. Manny. No surname necessary. Everyone knew who Manny was. If you were Filipino, he was more than a boxer. He was a myth made flesh, a man who punched his way out of poverty and into the presidency. He had the hands of a warrior, the heart of a farmer, and the aura of a saint. And now, apparently, he was coming to dinner. The news spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Sous chefs tightened their posture. Servers ironed their aprons for the second time. Even the dishwasher combed his hair. Miguel stood still in the middle of the kitchen, blinking hard, feeling the weight of something enormous pushing down on him. He hadn't asked for this, but if destiny had knocked, he would open the door. He threw away the prepped menu, the chicken adobo, the kare-kare. It wasn't enough, not tonight. He needed to create something transcendent, something that would not only fill a stomach, but also tap into the deepest vein of memory and longing. Something Manny wouldn't forget. Miguel pulled out his notebook, the one he kept hidden under a pile of receipts in his office drawer. It contained the ghosts of dishes that had never been served, recipes half-formed in dreams, flavors that he remembered from his grandmother's backyard in Quezon. He flipped through it, muttering ingredients like incantations, calamansi glaze, turmeric foam, salted duck egg powder. He wasn't cooking for a celebrity. He was cooking for a mirror. Manny was every Lola's grandson, every son who left the islands to chase something bigger. Tonight, the food had to speak all that. The kitchen moved like a battalion under his command. He instructed with precision, but his voice trembled slightly, only slightly, but enough for the sous chef to notice. Still, they obeyed. No one questioned the tension in Miguel's face. They saw the hands that had chopped, stirred, and served, for 17 years now moving like they belonged to someone younger, someone burning again. First came the appetizer, a sinigang reinterpretation, transformed into a deconstructed memory. Instead of a soup bowl, a shot glass of tamarind consomme sat next to a crisp rice chip topped with torched shrimp and green mango. The sourness was sharp but warm, like the first drop of rain on dry soil. Then the second course, arroz kakanin, but not as dessert. He presented it as a risotto, sticky rice infused with coconut cream, bits of roasted duck, and a brunoise of pickled green papaya. The colors on the plate glistened. It was playful but somber, nostalgic. The main course was the crown, lechon, but not whole, not for show. This one had been confitted for 36 hours, skin rendered until it cracked like glass under pressure, the fat melting with a whisper of spice, lemongrass, garlic, bay leaf, all sealed in. He served it with a sweet liver sauce reduced to a demi-glace and dotted the plate with charred pineapple gel. It was decadence wearing the mask of tradition. Dessert? He hesitated. He didn't want to overreach. But then he remembered his father's stories of ube scraped into bread rolls at midnight. So he made an ube mousse, subtle, not too sweet, layered over cassava cake crumbles and topped with a tuile shaped like a boxing glove. A joke, maybe, but heartfelt. By the time the table was set, the clock read 7:46 p.m. They arrived at 8:04. No fanfare, no booming voice. Just a quiet group of 5, walking in like they owned nothing and needed nothing. Manny was in a dark button-down, his posture calm, eyes alert. He sat without asking for anything, no airs, no demands. Miguel watched from behind the kitchen window, holding his breath, then exhaling only when the first plate left the pass. As the dishes arrived one by one, something curious happened. Manny didn't speak, not at first. He ate with the focus of a man who had spent a lifetime mastering his body. Slow, deliberate bites, each one analyzed. He closed his eyes at times. At others, he looked at his companions, nodded. But mostly, He looked at the food as if it were talking to him. Miguel felt his chest thudding. What did it mean? Was that a good silence or a bad one? Were his flavors too nostalgic, too try-hard? He imagined the critique that might follow. Too rich. Overthought. He paced behind the line. He polished a spoon that didn't need polishing. At one point, Manny set down his fork and looked across the room, straight toward the kitchen window, toward Miguel. Their eyes met, and in that brief second, Miguel saw it. A flicker. Maybe recognition. Maybe something else. But something passed between them, and then he said it. Quietly, to no one in particular, but the waiter heard and passed it on, like gospel. 3 words. Reminds me of home. That was all. Miguel felt like collapsing. He retreated into the prep area and sat on a flour bag, trying not to shake. That was more than a Michelin star. That was a validation no guidebook could give. He didn't cry. Not yet. He wouldn't let himself. But he felt something crack very gently in his chest. The night went on. Manny stayed for coffee. Barako, of course, served in clay cups bought in Batangas by Miguel's uncle 30 years ago. He sipped it without comment, then stood, shook hands with the manager and approached the kitchen. Miguel stepped forward. He expected a firm handshake, maybe a nod. But Manny did more. He held Miguel's hand a moment longer than expected, looked him in the eyes and said, "You did something good here. Thank you." No fireworks, no tips thrown in the air, but those words echoed louder than any applause. As Manny left, Miguel turned to his team. No one said anything. The clatter of the kitchen returned, plates being washed, silverware being counted. But everything felt different. The air had changed. Then came the final moment, the one no one expected, the bill. But that part would come later. For now, Miguel allowed himself a deep breath. He had fed a champion. And maybe for the first time in his life, he felt like one too. The dining room had begun to hum again with low chatter and quiet admiration, the kind of sound that fills a space when something important has happened, but no one is entirely sure how to speak about it. Miguel stood behind the kitchen pass, arms folded, not touching the glass but close enough to feel its coolness. His face was still flushed from the adrenaline, his fingertips tingling, as though the energy he had poured into each course had not yet left his body. The plates had come back clean. Some were wiped with bread. One had a neatly folded napkin in the center, the international sign of this was perfect. The staff was whispering now, letting themselves exhale. The waiter who'd heard Manny speak replayed the line again and again like it was a song lyric. Reminds me of home. No one dared speak too loudly. They didn't want to disturb whatever spell had been cast. Then the manager approached the table with the check, folded with elegance, placed inside a small leather holder with the restaurant's gold-stamped emblem. Discretion was key. This was not a night for ceremony or flamboyance. He bowed slightly as he handed it to one of Manny's companions, an assistant or maybe a business manager, who took it with a courteous nod. Miguel barely paid attention. The food had been served, received, and remembered. That was the full arc as far as he was concerned, but fate has a tendency to insert itself when you least expect it. As the assistant moved to place the check in his inner coat pocket, someone brushed past him, a guest leaving. Maybe a child. The details would blur later. What remained was this. The check slipped. It fell. Not under the table, not neatly beside a foot. No, it fluttered, mocking, slow, landing wide open on the floor, like a paper confession. And the number was right there for all to see. 782,000 Brazilians in pesos. But everyone around did the math. 70,000 reais, or almost $12,000 for one meal, one dinner, 5 people. The silence came instantly, deafening. A spoon clinked onto a saucer and echoed like a bell. A glass was mid-air in a server's hand, forgotten. A couple at a nearby table froze mid-conversation. A teenager with a phone under the table instinctively lifted it, recording without thinking. Miguel felt it before he saw it, that sudden drop in air pressure, the instinctive tightness behind the eyes, the way his spine straightened without consent. He looked over and saw the check still on the floor, face up like a murder weapon. The assistant picked it up quickly, too quickly. His brow furrowed. His eyes darted to the manager, then to Miguel, then back to the number. "Is this correct?" he asked. His voice wasn't hostile, but it wasn't calm either. It had the sharpness of someone trying to keep a blade in its sheath. The manager hesitated, then looked at Miguel with a mix of apology and fear. "Chef?" Miguel stepped forward. He didn't mean to. His feet moved on their own, his apron still damp, his hands slick with anxiety. Yes, he said. "I prepared the menu myself. I sourced ingredients that aren't on our regular stock. Wagyu A5 from Japan, Burriovas flown in this morning, truffles from Mindanao. Rare ones, not the European kind. I had to have them flown overnight. He stopped himself. The words felt dry, flat. The more he explained, the worse it sounded. "I didn't plan it for price," he added quickly. "I planned it for meaning, for significance. I wasn't trying to—" He trailed off. There were eyes on him now, not just from the table, but from the entire room. The kind of attention that wraps around you like cold plastic, suffocating and unforgiving. He tried to laugh it off, but no sound came out. His throat was dry. The assistant looked at the check again, then back at him. "This is a lot of money," he said. Miguel nodded. "I know. You should have cleared it before." He didn't disagree. He couldn't. "I just wanted to give the best I could. It wasn't about the cost." And then it happened. He blinked. Once, then again. The moisture welled up without warning. His chest tightened like a vice. The first tear slipped out, quick and hot, and he turned his face to the side instinctively, hoping to hide it. But he couldn't stop the second, or the third. There, in the middle of his restaurant, with his staff watching, with his name on the door and the smell of soy glaze still in the air, Miguel began to cry. Not dramatically, not loudly, but visibly, inescapably. Tears dripping down his face, staining his apron, his pride dissolving in front of everyone. The assistant's expression shifted. He didn't know what to do. No one did. Even Manny looked surprised, genuinely surprised. His brow furrowed, his hand on the table. For the first time all evening, the mask of calm peeled slightly. Miguel wiped at his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself, failing miserably. "I'm sorry," he said, voice shaking. "I'm sorry if it was too much. I didn't think. I wasn't trying to take advantage. I just wanted him to feel something. I wanted it to matter." The room was still. Even the clatter from the kitchen had stopped. And then Manny stood up. No one moved. The assistant stepped aside. Manny walked slowly over to Miguel. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. He simply looked him in the eyes. Miguel couldn't meet his gaze. He was trying to shrink into himself. He felt ridiculous. He had served food, not saved lives. And yet here he was, weeping like a child. But then Manny spoke. "You made something real," he said. His voice was low but steady. "Don't apologize for that." There was a pause, a long one, the kind that makes time slow. And then Manny reached into his jacket, pulled out a pen and signed the check himself. No whisper to the assistant, no hesitation. He wrote something else on the bottom too. Miguel didn't see what, but the assistant raised his brows slightly when he looked at it, and that was it. Manny turned to leave, nodding at the staff. He paused by the door, then added almost as an afterthought, "I've paid more for less." The restaurant stayed quiet for several seconds after the door closed behind him. Then the manager exhaled. Servers glanced at each other. The busboy muttered a quiet, "Whoa." But Miguel stayed frozen. He had cried in front of his hero. He had overcharged the most respected man in the country. He had embarrassed himself, and yet he felt lighter, somehow. The assistant returned to the table, placed a thick envelope on the manager's desk. Inside was full payment, no questions, no reductions, and a tip large enough to be considered another bill entirely. Later that night, when the restaurant had emptied and the kitchen was half clean, Miguel sat alone at table 3, the one Manny had occupied. He stared at the candle still flickering in the votive glass. He thought about that look, the brief one during the second course, the pause before dessert, the way Manny had closed his eyes during the lechon just for a moment, like someone remembering a song they hadn't heard since childhood. Miguel touched the edge of the table. Maybe, just maybe, the cost hadn't been the point. What mattered was what had been exchanged, unseen and unpaid, a memory for a meal, a story for a flavor, a tear for a truth. And for Miguel, that was priceless. The next morning, Miguel arrived at the restaurant before sunrise. The air was still, and the sky above Libertad was bruised with that early grey light that makes the city feel almost honest. No horns, no rush, just the metallic clink of his keys in the front door and the creak of wood that had seen years of wait and waiting. The kitchen was still warm from the night before. It smelled faintly of vinegar, pork, and the sharpness of burnt sugar, memories baked into the walls. Miguel didn't turn on the lights right away. He stood in the dark, taking in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerators and the low ticking of the gas lines. The room had witnessed everything, his triumph, his panic, his breakdown. Now it was just a kitchen again. But the world outside hadn't returned to normal, not entirely. By 9 a.m. the first article had gone live. Some small food blog, based in Manila, had caught the moment from a diner's phone footage. The headline read, "Chef cries after serving Pacquiao a dinner worth P782K." By noon it had reached Twitter, then Facebook, then TikTok, then television. The internet, in its usual fashion, didn't settle on one narrative. It fractured into factions. There were those who mocked him, saying he was another chef trying to pull a fast one on a celebrity, inflating the bill for clout, crying when caught. Others saw sincerity. They reposted clips of his shaking voice, the way his hands trembled, the way Manny had looked at him not with anger, but something closer to compassion. Some debated the price, some debated the ingredients. A few experts chimed in with breakdowns. Wagyu A5, especially BMS 12, alone could cost over $100,000. Truffles from Mindanao are rare and not exported. The real cost was in the execution. But no one could price the tears. And that became the sticking point. Why did the chef cry? Miguel didn't give interviews. He declined TV spots. He refused radio requests, ignored emails, muted his notifications. Even his staff got strict instructions not to answer anything. The restaurant would stay open, but it would not speak. The silence did more than words ever could. Soon the tables were full, not just with customers, but with pilgrims. They didn't come just to eat. They came to feel. They wanted to sit at table 3, even if they didn't get the special menu. They asked Miguel if he was on the line that day, if he remembered which plate Manny had used, which cup he'd held. Some wanted selfies, others just whispered, "Thank you." One woman left a note in a tip jar that said, "I cried too. Thank you for showing us we're allowed." One night, a couple drove 9 hours just to order the lechon. They said it was for their father's birthday. He had passed away during the pandemic. Lechon had been his favorite dish. They wept quietly when the plate arrived. Miguel stood far enough to give them space, but close enough to notice. He nodded at them when they left. They didn't need to say anything. Still, for all the praise and attention, Miguel wrestled with shame. The feeling hadn't vanished. He still replayed the moment when the check had fallen, still flinched at the echo of the assistant's question, still felt the heat rising in his chest whenever he thought of the tears. It was one thing to be passionate, another to lose control, and in front of everyone. But time, as always, softened the edges. Then came the letter. It arrived folded neatly, inside an unmarked envelope, placed in the mail slot like any other bill or delivery notice. No stamp, no return address. Just Miguel's name in confident handwriting across the front. He opened it slowly, expecting some bureaucratic form or maybe a customer complaint about the rising prices. But it wasn't that. The letter read, "Miguel, there's a flavor that doesn't come from any ingredient. You can't order it, you can't buy it. It's memory. What you served me was more than food. It was a return. For a moment I forgot who I had to be. I remembered who I was. That's not something you can price, but if I could, I'd say it was cheap at any cost. Thank you. M." There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. Miguel folded the letter and placed it inside the small drawer beneath the register. He didn't frame it, didn't announce it. He simply kept it close, like a match tucked in a pocket, ready to spark again when the doubt crept in. In the following weeks, the restaurant shifted subtly. He didn't raise prices. He didn't introduce a Pacquiao tasting menu or start selling branded merchandise. Instead, he refined. He removed 2 dishes he no longer believed in. He spent more time at the farmer's market, talking to older vendors, looking for ingredients that reminded him of his childhood. He started writing again in his notebook, not for fame, not for guests, just to remember. Occasionally, customers asked him, "Was it worth it, that dinner?" He never answered directly, but sometimes he'd tell a story. About a time many years ago, when he was still a junior line cook in Cebu, and he'd watched a chef cry after burning a pot of adobo so badly it turned to charcoal. That chef had told him, "If you're not crying in the kitchen once a year, you're not cooking hard enough." Other times he'd simply say yes and walk away. Months passed, seasons turned, the buzz faded, as all things do. The restaurant remained, quieter now, more grounded. Miguel kept cooking. He never cried again, not like that. But something had changed in him. He no longer feared the moment when emotion took over. He respected it, let it come close, brush against his ribs. He understood finally that cooking wasn't about perfection. It was about offering something invisible, something real. One rainy evening just before closing, a teenage boy walked in, alone. He sat nervously at the far table and ordered a single bowl of arroz caldo. Miguel almost sent someone else to make it, but something made him take the ladle himself. He ladled the broth, topped it with fried garlic and scallions, added a touch of calamansi, and brought it to the boy himself. The boy looked surprised. "You're the chef," he said. Miguel nodded. "I saw the video," the boy added. "The one where you cry." Miguel didn't respond. The boy stirred his bowl, eyes low. "My mom used to make arroz caldo when I was sick. I haven't had it since she passed." Miguel sat down, just for a minute. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. And in that moment, watching the boy take his first spoonful, Miguel understood something final. The bill had been public, but the value had always been private. You can feed a stomach, or you can feed a soul. That night with Manny, Miguel had done both, and for the rest of his life he would try to do it again, quietly, sincerely, without fear of what it might cost.